Hello everyone. In this walkthrough, I'm going to show you a quick and easy way to validate code identifiers in a Power Automate flow. We're going to use a straightforward and powerful action from the Cloudmersive Data Validation connector to handle our code identifier validation. Before we get started, it would be great if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel. Let's begin by clicking Create, and then let's select the Instant Cloud Flow option. We're going to manually trigger our flows just so we can have full control over our data when we run a few quick tests. All we're going to do is add one action into our flow. Let's click Add an Action, and then let's type Cloudmersive into the search bar. Let's scroll down until we find the Cloudmersive Data Validation connector with the blue-grayish logo. Let's click See More to view the actions list. And from here, let's scroll down to find an action called Validate a Code Identifier. Just a quick note before we move on here, we'll need a free Cloudmersive API key to create our Data Validation API connection, and we can get one by registering a free account on the Cloudmersive website. That'll give us a limit of 800 API calls per month with no additional commitments, and we can use that same API key to access all the different connectors we saw on the previous page. Let's now open the Validate a Code Identifier action, and let's click Show All to view the advanced parameters. Here's where we'll customize our validation requests to fit our own use cases. As we can see, we have different dropdowns on this list that allow us to set true or false values under a few different character types, including hyphens, numbers, periods, underscores, and white spaces. As you may be aware, different programming languages have their own way of dealing with characters like these in the context of code identifiers, and some characters, like underscores and numbers, are generally more accepted than others. In this case, however, it's important to note that this API treats all of these characters as invalid by default, unless we tell it otherwise. In other words, we really only need to select true values from this list when we want to make sure a given character is treated as valid. For example, if our code identifiers allow underscores but they don't allow hyphens, we can set the allow hyphens dropdown to true, and we can just leave the allow underscore value empty. Down below our text input field, we can also set a maximum and minimum character length for our code identifiers, which we can enter as valid integers. Let's now test this out with a quick example. Let's say we're validating a code identifier named hello_world. After we enter that value, let's save and run our flow once without touching any of the settings we talked about in the request body. In our response body, we get a valid identifier false value, and we get an error message that explains the invalid response is due to the underscore. Now let's go back into our flow, and this time let's set the allow underscore value to true. Let's then save and test our flow once again. As we can see, we now get a true response to indicate our code identifier is valid. And that's all there is to it. Now we can validate code identifiers without writing a line of code ourselves. All we need to do now is tie a text input into our flow and set up a way to handle errors when we get invalid identifier responses. Thanks for watching. Once again, it would be awesome if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel.